Peter Swan, 1964. In the swinging 60s, Peter Swan looked destined to become an England legend. A commanding centre-back with the grit of the Sheffield Terraces in his bones, Swan made his international debut at just 23 and seemed certain to anchor England's defence for years to come. His club, Sheffield Wednesday, were one of the top sides in the country, and Swan's rugged but intelligent defending earned him the reputation of a leader on the pitch, calm under pressure and fearless in the tackle. But beneath the surface, the temptations of the era were growing. Players in the 60s didn't earn superstar wages like they do today. A few extra pounds from a shady bet could feel like harmless pocket money. Swan, along with teammates Tony Kay and David Lane, got pulled into a bookmaker's web, a scheme to bet on their own team to lose a match against Ipswich Town. The plan was shockingly brazen: fix the outcome, pocket the winnings, and keep playing like nothing had happened. But the scandal broke in 1964, exposing not just the players, but the underbelly of a game trying to look squeaky clean for the television age. The punishment was swift and ruthless. Swan was convicted and jailed for 4 months, prison time that crushed his public image and made him a national pariah. Worse still, the Football Association banned him for life. By the time the ban was lifted in the early 70s, Swan was past his prime. He returned to Wednesday for a handful of matches, but the England call-up never came. He watched the 1966 World Cup, the one he should have played in, from his living room, wondering what might have been. In later years, Swan often spoke with raw honesty about how one bad decision erased everything he'd built, leaving only regret and a lesson that outlived him. Paolo Rossi, in the year 1980. Italy's football history is full of drama, but few stories swing from disgrace to triumph quite like Paolo Rossi's. In 1980, Rossi was a rising star, known for his poacher's instinct and lightning movement inside the box. He'd helped Vicenza gain promotion, scored freely for Perugia, and was already being groomed to lead the Azzurri at the World Cup. But just as quickly as his star rose, it came crashing down with the Totonero scandal, a sprawling match-fixing and illegal betting ring that snared clubs, officials, and players alike. Rossi was accused of helping to fix matches while at Perugia, a charge he always denied. He claimed he was dragged in by association, not by action. But in Italy's eyes, guilt by proximity was enough. The punishment was brutal, a 3-year ban, later reduced to 2 after appeals. For Rossi, it felt like the game had abandoned him overnight. He spent months in football's wilderness, his name dragged through headlines, his reputation in tatters. But football loves redemption as much as it loves scandal. Rossi's ban ended just in time for the 1982 World Cup in Spain. Many doubted he was fit enough, sharp enough, or deserving enough to pull on the blue shirt again. But when it mattered, Rossi delivered one of the greatest World Cup performances of all time. He bagged a hat-trick against Brazil in a match often called the greatest ever played. He scored both goals in the semi-final against Poland, then opened the scoring in the final against West Germany. Italy lifted the trophy, and Rossi lifted the golden boot and golden ball. His redemption turned scandal into legend, proof that sometimes football gives you a second chance if you dare to take it. Diego Maradona, in the year 1994. No player embodies football's fine line between genius and self-destruction like Diego Armando Maradona. By 1994, Maradona was no longer the wiry street kid who danced through England's defense in Mexico 8 years earlier. Years of drug abuse, late nights, and endless controversies had left him physically heavy but mentally unpredictable, a ticking time bomb with moments of undiminished brilliance. When Argentina arrived at the USA World Cup in 1994, Maradona's presence alone was enough to strike fear into opponents and hope into Argentine hearts. He opened the tournament with a blistering goal against Greece, a rocket into the top corner that made the world wonder if maybe, just maybe, the old magic was back. But the celebration told a darker story. Maradona ran to the nearest TV camera, eyes wild, veins bulging, screaming with a manic intensity that felt less like triumph and more like a cry for help. Days later, it all unraveled. A post-match drug test came back positive for ephedrine, a banned stimulant. FIFA banned him for 15 months, effectively banishing him from the World Cup stage forever. It wasn't Maradona's first dance with scandal. In 1991, he'd already served a 15-month ban for cocaine use while at Napoli, tarnishing his legacy there too. But no punishment could erase what he did with a ball at his feet. Maradona lived and died as football's ultimate contradiction, angel and outlaw, savior and saboteur, worshipped in murals long after the final whistle blew him away. Eric Cantona, in the year 1995. Eric Cantona didn't just play football, he performed it, like a revolutionary with a ball instead of a manifesto. When he arrived at Manchester United in 1992, the club was desperate for inspiration. Cantona gave them more than goals, he gave them swagger. With his turned-up collar, imperious strut and creative genius, he turned United from perennial nearly men into a juggernaut. But Cantona's fire always burned close to chaos. On 25th of January 1995, at Selhurst Park against Crystal Palace, that fire exploded. After being sent off for a reckless kick at Richard Shaw, Cantona trudged toward the tunnel, then pivoted toward the stands. A fan, Matthew Simmons, hurled abuse. In a moment that would become one of the most replayed clips in Premier League history, Cantona launched himself over the advertising hoardings and landed a flying kung fu kick squarely into Simmons' chest. Punches followed. The stadium fell into stunned silence. Football had never seen anything like it. The FA's punishment was swift and decisive. A 9-month ban from football, a £20,000 fine, and 120 hours of community service. Many thought it was the end for Cantona, but instead, it became part of his myth. He returned the following season, captained United to another title, and delivered the poetic football that made him a cult hero forever. Years later, Cantona would brush off the incident with his now legendary line about seagulls and trawlers, a cryptic mic drop that turned a scandal into performance art. Joey Barton, in the year 2017. If ever there was an English footballer who wore controversy like a second kit, it's Joey Barton. He was a tough tackling midfielder with enough talent to carve out a steady Premier League career, but his knack for trouble overshadowed almost every moment of brilliance. Barton's rap sheet reads like a tabloid greatest hits, fighting with teammates, assaulting a teenager outside a McDonald's, stubbing a cigar out in a teammate's eye, and countless red cards for reckless challenges. Yet for all his off-field brawls, it was betting that ended his career once and for all. Between 2006 and 2016, Barton placed over 1,200 bets on football matches, including games involving his own teams, a direct violation of the FA's strict anti-gambling rules. In 2017, the FA threw the book at him, an 18-month ban and a £30,000 fine. At 34, Barton knew it was the final whistle. He retired that same year, claiming he was made an example of while football's deep-rooted betting culture carried on behind the curtains. In his memoirs and media appearances since, Barton has railed against what he sees as football's hypocrisy, clubs sponsored by betting firms, but players banned for using them. But the rules are clear. Trust is sacred in sport. A player betting on matches, even without fixing outcomes, chips away at that trust. Barton remains a polarizing figure, an intelligent pundit to some, an unrepentant loose cannon to others. Either way, he is living proof that chaos rarely leaves quietly. Samir Nasri, in the year 2018. When Samir Nasri broke through at Marseille as a teenager, he was anointed the new Zidane. With sublime close control, quick feet, and an eye for a killer pass, he seemed destined to dominate Europe's midfields for years. At Arsenal, he dazzled fans with bursts of brilliance and gave hope that Arsène Wenger's faith in youth might yield another invincible generation. At Manchester City, he won trophies and scored crucial goals, but rumours about his attitude and lifestyle never quite left him alone. His fall wasn't explosive like Maradona's or Cantona's, it was more like a slow drift into irrelevance. The final blow came off the pitch in 2016 when Nasri visited a Los Angeles clinic for an intravenous drip, a treatment meant to boost recovery, but the drip exceeded the allowed volume under WADA's anti-doping regulations. Investigators ruled that he broke doping rules, even if the drip didn't contain steroids. In 2018, UEFA handed him a 6-month ban, later increased to 18 months on appeal by WADA. Nasri tried to return but never looked the same. Short stints at West Ham and Anderlecht fizzled out. The player who once ghosted past defenders with a shrug now found himself unwanted, out of shape, and unable to find a club willing to take the risk. He retired quietly, his gifts overshadowed by questions of what he could have been if only he'd treated football like a craft rather than a casual gig. For young players, Nasri is a reminder that talent means little if you treat the rules like suggestions. Shen Si, in the year 2012. When Shen Si pulled on the Shanghai Shenhua shirt in the late 90s, he was seen as the poster boy for Chinese football's ambition. A gifted playmaker with an elegant first touch and a calm presence in midfield, Shen captained both club and country, earning the respect of fans who dreamed of China finally becoming a true football power in Asia. But beneath the glittering promises of a new league and corporate investment, Chinese football in the early 2000s was rotten to its core. At the time, match fixing ran rampant in the Chinese Super League. Bookmakers and shady middlemen preyed on players and referees alike, offering bribes that seemed irresistible, especially with wages far lower than in Europe. Shen Si's downfall began when he and 3 teammates accepted a bribe to throw a match between Shanghai Shenhua and Tianjin Tida in 2003. The price of their betrayal was steep, 12 million yuan exchanged hands, all to ensure Shenhua underperformed on command. When the Chinese government finally cracked down on football corruption nearly a decade later, they made an example of Shen Si and his co-conspirators. In 2012, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison and banned from football for life. The punishment was meant not only for him, but for an entire generation, a message to players that fixing games would no longer be tolerated. For Shen, who once dreamed of leading China to the World Cup knockout rounds, the reality was bitter. He emerged from prison a forgotten man, his name now synonymous with betrayal. China's football landscape is still rebuilding trust to this day, and Shen Si's shadow still lingers. Wilson Raj Perumal, in the 2010s. Wilson, Raj Perumal's name may not appear on any team sheet, but no single person corrupted more football careers in the modern era than this Singaporean fixer. A master manipulator with connections across Asia, Africa, and Eastern Europe, Perumal's empire didn't just ruin games, it ruined lives. His network paid players and referees in struggling leagues pennies on the dollar compared to what the fix would earn betting syndicates overseas. His operations were cunningly simple: identify national teams or clubs with unpaid wages or financial turmoil, then offer players cash up front to miss penalties, gift easy goals, or concede corners at convenient moments. In the 2000s and early 2010s, Perumal's fingerprints showed up in suspicious results from African World Cup qualifiers to Baltic League matches no one in the West ever watched. Dozens of players, mostly unknown outside their homelands, were handed lifetime bans by FIFA after investigations traced suspicious match activity back to Perumal's bribes. Perumal himself was eventually caught, jailed, then turned informant, writing a tell-all book that reads like a crime thriller. But his confessions did nothing to restore the careers of the players he lured into the underworld. Many of those banned found themselves blacklisted not just by FIFA, but by local communities that once cheered them on. They vanished into poverty or obscurity, while Perumal faded into witness protection somewhere in Europe. His story is the ultimate reminder that for every superstar draped in medals, there are hundreds more whose names were erased by one quiet deal and a whispered promise of quick money. René Higuita, in the year 1993. If you want to understand René Higuita, all you have to do is watch that scorpion kick save. Wembley Stadium, 1995, a friendly between Colombia and England. An English attacker's shot drifts toward goal. Instead of catching it, Higuita dives forward, arches his back mid-air, flicks his heels over his head, and clears the ball with the soles of his boots. It's outrageous, unnecessary, and completely unforgettable, just like the man himself. El Loco wasn't just showmanship though, he was the heartbeat of Colombia's golden generation in the late 80s and early 90s. A sweeper keeper before the term was fashionable, Higuita charged upfield, dribbled past strikers, took free kicks, and lived life on the edge of disaster and brilliance. But his daring extended far beyond the pitch. In 1993, Higuita admitted to acting as a go-between for Pablo Escobar's cartel, helping negotiate a ransom payment for a kidnapped girl. He saw it as helping a family in trouble. FIFA saw it as a player getting involved in crime. Higuita was arrested, jailed for 7 months, and banned from football under FIFA's strict code of conduct. He missed the 1994 World Cup, a stage tailor-made for his flamboyance, while his country was torn apart by violence and tragedy, including the assassination of teammate Andres Escobar after an own goal. When Higuita returned to the game, his cult hero status remained, but the stigma lingered too. He bounced between clubs well into his 40s, always a reminder that football in Colombia was forever entangled with a darker story, and that even heroes can get caught up in forces far bigger than the game. George Best, in the 1970s. Technically, George Best was never formally banned by FIFA or any football association, but in truth, the man they called the Fifth Beatle was exiled by his own choices, one hangover, missed training session, and disappearing act at a time. Bursting onto the scene at Manchester United as a teenager, Best was pure electricity, jinking runs, impudent chips, and goals that made defenders look like fools. He helped United win the 1968 European Cup, the first English club to do so, and at just 22, he looked immortal. But Best found a second home in the nightclubs of Manchester and London, where his face appeared on as many gossip columns as sports pages. Managers begged him to turn up to training, teammates covered for his absences as long as they could. By the early 1970s, the romance between Best and Manchester United soured. Too many fines, too many no-shows, too many mornings when he never came back from a night out. At 27, an age when most players hit their peak, Best had burned through his brilliance. He drifted through a dozen short-lived comebacks, Fulham, Stockport County, Hibernian, even a bizarre stint with the San Jose Earthquakes in the US. But the magic flickered only in glimpses. The drinking never stopped. The training never got serious again. Best once said he spent a fortune on booze, birds, and fast cars. The rest I just squandered. Unlike the others, there was no official life ban, just the cold truth that sometimes the greatest player on the pitch can be his own worst enemy. George Best banned himself from the game long before the world was ready to let him go.